The floor is yours, John.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Well, I sent around an agenda for the meeting, and why don't I just start at the top? So the first one is whether anyone has heard any news about master plan, the timing of the master plan. Peter?
Yes. So this was brought up by the chair of the county airport advisory board last night at our meeting to April Gaspari, and in addition, oh God, I hate when names zip out of my head, but the Department of Public Works, Hugh Gretchen,
Yeah.
was there as well. And it was not a long conversation. The question was, is there anything new or, any new information about the master plan? And essentially the response was crickets. And so that's where we are. As we all know, number one, the county's wrapped up in its budget season. So on that alone, there's probably little likelihood of anything happening between now and the holiday season. And then, of course, there's the holiday season. In the midst of all that, Latimer will resign at some point. And then they'll be off to the races with the interim county executive and planning for that. So nobody was making any representations or predictions.
But is there any chance they'll just abort the whole effort? Or is there
That's
some
also
legal
that's also a
requirement?
good. So I've been asking myself that a bit, and for shits and giggles, I was looking the other day at, hang on one second, at the airport budget, which is, the draft budgets have just been released. And now my Google Drive went to, here it is. Okay. So I apologize. There is a bottom line is, and I'll get the specifics in a second, but there is a reference to the master plan revision process in the 2025 as a project in the 2025 airport budget. Now, I'm not going to claim that that I know what that means or whether it really has, how much significance, if any, it actually has. But it was not omitted, and in fact, it was included in the budget. Oh, here it is. So under page D4 of the budget, the very first bullet item for ongoing program areas, for ongoing department initiatives is, quote, airport master plan update process.
Okay, good.
I don't think there's any line item, budget wise for it per se. Nothing jumped out at me. But that's the information I have to report.
Good. There's a sense in which, from the standpoint of the task force, we're going to come up with our issues that we want to advocate for, whether it's they actually produce a new master plan or a new version of the old master plan, kind of is an aside. The master plan gives it a structure and gives it a certain amount of timing, but I don't think it'd be a big impediment if they decided to abandon it. Because we still want what we want.
Right. I agree with you. I think the value of jointly expressing goals and preferences of these municipalities together has virtually the same value, whether they find their place in a new master plan or not.
Okay. Michael, you have anything to add to that? I don't know if you were at the meeting or not. You're on mute. Still on, yep, there you go.
Conflict last night. I couldn't make it. Previously, there's been speculation that the county doesn't want to generate a master plan while the millionaire litigation is still pending. And while that matter may be making progress, that progress is slow. So there may be, go ahead, Peter.
Just want to announce that it was announced yesterday that the millionaire settlement resolutions were passed
Ah,
by the County Board of Legislators on Monday. It doesn't mean the whole thing is 100% wrapped up, because now that goes to the judge and what have you, but it is essentially a done deal now. On the other hand, the other major piece of litigation that the county has cited in connection with keeping the brakes tapped on the master plan, that litigation with JSX and Blade and those upstart, we'll call them upstart airlines, as it were, that is still on appeal at the federal level and unresolved at the state level, where it was sent back by the federal judge for reconsideration. So if the county wants, to continue to lean on the ongoing, the potential impact on litigation, it still has an excuse. It can still point to that.
yeah, I'm sure. I always thought of those two cases a little bit differently. The JSX and the Blade are different types of uses, where the millionaire case had more of a domino effect. But to your point, if the county wants to use those as excuses, they certainly can. So based on that, you may or may not see more progress on the master plan.
I just think that what's likely to happen politically, and again, this is not to undercut our effort at all, because again, I think that the airport and stuff around the airport continues regardless.
Yeah.
And the sooner the county hears more from this group of municipalities, the better, I think, from the point of view of the municipalities' shared interests. But I will say that from a political point of view, again, Latimer's going to resign to take his seat in Congress. Ken Jenkins is going to become the interim county executive. My understanding is that the law only gives him a few months before there's a special election. Ken's base of support, unlike George's, is not in this area, which means that he's going to be, I think it's unlikely that he's going to see any upside in focusing time and resources on an area that is, that on an area that impacts more up here, but also, it's not like something awful is going to happen if he doesn't push the ball forward on it now, and he's going to have his hands full politically for a few months. So again, I have no inside information on that, but just from being an observer of the county for a good number of years. I would be surprised to see any big push. On the other hand, that's not to say that they couldn't take some incremental steps. It's just hard to, and we certainly don't want to be behind the 8 ball on anything they do. So that's where I am.
And do you think he'll have an opponent? Will he be challenged in the special election? Or
I mean,
because
I've heard rumors that he will.
Because that could make us more important.
For sure. And I've heard rumors that he will. I've heard rumors, but again, I don't want to be.
Oh no, okay, we don't know.
I don't want to go more
one
into.
reason why we keep
that.
going forward. If he thinks being responsive to us could help him in the election, that'd be a good thing for us.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know. Okay. Now, Michael, did you yielded the floor to Peter, and then do you want us to come back to you?
Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you.
You're
But
okay.
yeah, but thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the status of the briefing papers. And I think, just to sum it up, the air pollution and the stormwater and the groundwater papers are pretty good shape and are going to April at the airport. And then there'll be a meeting between April and Martha to discuss them. That's a fair statement, Greg?
For the most part, so I spoke with Chris, and again, I have to have a follow-up conversation with him, but what he was thinking of first, and again, this is recommendation, and I'm more inclined to go with his recommendations than my own, is that, well, then we just backtrack a little bit first. So, I mean, so we have 3 that Martha has submitted already to myself, and I know, Nick, you've seen it. I'm sure Michael, Peter, and John know you've seen it as well. So now Chris gave some of his recommendations on them from revisions. Now he has told me himself, again, you guys don't have to take those recommendations, and that's your choice to do so. Now I will just say personally, it is my very strong opinion that you guys should, given his expertise. And again, we'll defer to you guys how much you want to take that into consideration. But just going off to the next thing I was going to say is that what other thing that Chris mentioned is that he may want to see it dispersed to the municipal boards first before it goes to April. Just to say if they want to chime in anything else, and then it can go to April as a draft.
Well, what was his logic for that? I mean, that really slows up the process.
Just so the way he saw it is that just so the elected, because remember again, this is a political board appointed by elected officials from the 7 different communities, so that way they have the ability to see it first and give their own input and insight before it goes to any county officials. So that way they're kept in the loop. So that way they don't feel that it's gone to the airport without them getting to have their say.
We're mixing up apples and oranges. We said that we would send them our recommendations, which are the summary of those white papers, to the municipal boards, and the white papers could be attached. We don't want to send all the white papers. They'll just confuse people.
And they're not
Going
going
to send our list of recommendations.
And we're not, and the town boards aren't going to comment on them separately anyway. I mean, our experience with the TUA white paper and resolution was the town boards voted on them on an up and down basis, and they universally accepted them. And the purpose of having April or some of the county executives or some of the county employees review the white papers was to make sure that our assumptions and our analysis, was correct, and that we weren't omitting or misstating material facts. And and to avoid any embarrassment after the fact, once these are presented to the municipal boards.
Yeah.
So I couldn't disagree more strongly with reversing the order.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay though too. Yeah, I'm just reporting based on the conversation I had with him. But again, this is a discussion.
Yeah,
Again,
and I appreciate your reporting back, and I know you're reporting back, right?
Yeah.
Greg, you can also remind Chris that he agreed on that process that Michael and I are supporting when we had a talk with him when he joined us that night. So let's keep moving forward.
Yeah.
We want to wrap this up.
Honestly, I think I agree with that. But, but what I do also want to point out is we have a representative on the board from every one of these communities. These reports will be, briefing papers will be distributed to everybody on the committee. If anything in it raises a concern for you or your municipality, raise your hand, right? You've heard the discussions. This is why we have a group to kind of look into this. I think it can go simultaneously, I think, to April and to the members of the committee. I don't think we need to do that as a sequential process. What do people think about that? I mean, I've read her papers, Martha's papers. I don't think there's anything that's likely to be of controversy with the various municipalities, but I can't judge everybody's position.
Yeah, I think we can all read them simultaneously. I don't know why we couldn't do that. And if April comes back with some corrections, or recommendations, we can take that into account, once
Right.
we read them too, yeah.
Right.
So it's that.
What do other people think about that?
Well, Jack, I just mentioned one thing. Says I know that just in the email, because I responded to those in the email thread. I know John, I know that Nick, you're on the email too. Martha's not here; she was on it. So I'll start with you, John, you, Nick. Did you guys just still have a chance to see the track revisions that I made? And the revisions that I made were what Chris told me that he was what his recommendations were, just for revision.
You're muted, Nick.
No, I didn't look at them yet.
Okay. So then I would definitely at least just when you have a chance, just to take a look. And he did it for all three that Martha has done so far.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't think Martha's going to have any problems with the very limited markup he did. And I don't think she's going to have any problems with the changes. But they were of a nature to, because I think these briefing papers need to be forward-looking. And he took out some things that were more backward-looking. So that was basically what he did. And it's maybe, what's the paper, Nick? 8 pages of text or something like that? 8, yeah. And he didn't even manipulate more than a third of a page, really.
Who's memory? There's about 8, but there's three separate ones.
Yeah. I know. Okay, so let's make sure, let's distribute the briefing papers to everybody on the committee, if we can do that. And then let's get it set up for Martha to go speak with April. And then we go forward, no? Peter.
Can anyone, what's the date on the current briefing papers?
Hers are all current.
Well, like, for
Within a
example,
within a week of now.
within a week of now? Oh, okay, very good. Okay.
So John, I'm wondering, from my paper, because I was getting the sense at the last meeting, people were getting a little heated because I came up with these ideas and they were worried about changing the footprint. But that was, at the beginning of my paper, I said this is all, with keeping the same footprint of the
Right.
airport. But I think I'd love for you to just look at my paper before it's distributed to everybody, just to make
Okay.
sure, because I don't want to cause people in an uproar.
No. And, if you want, both Michael and Peter have offered to look, and, they've been on this county board for quite a while.
Oh,
So they're
great.
pretty
All right, so
experienced.
I'll send it to the 3 of you
Good.
to take a look at it, just to make sure.
No, that's fine.
Okay, great.
That conversation, I rewatched the tape. This is something we ought to think about, I think. I watched the tape, and people did raise the issue of, just as you're saying, wait, we don't want to make too many improvements because it could attract more people, things like that. Well, we're only about 15% of the county's population here. So the other 85% is not having a say in what we're doing, and yet they might have views. So as time passes, if the conditions in the terminal really deteriorate relative to what people think is a reasonable standard, we might be seeing more pressure from outside our little communities to put pressure to improve things. I mean, I just think we can't, it's very difficult, I think, to be against all change. So we got to think about this.
No, I like what you're saying, John. I actually had an interesting conversation last night with someone that was involved in the redesign of JFK and LaGuardia Airport. They're
Wow.
part of the Vantage Corporation. And it was really enlightening to speak to them. And I was mentioning about the committee, and they were sharing with me, like, Michelle, you got to look at it this way. Um, Customer satisfaction changes can be made without structural changes. And he gave me an example of traffic flow at LaGuardia. And he said that in the past, how traffic was looked at, all the traffic people had walkie-talkies, and they were almost like officers blowing whistles and on walkie-talkies. And it was just very like, you got to move, you got to move. And we've all probably experienced that at LaGuardia. And what they did was they retrained that staff to be more about helping, not about, punishing and criticizing. And they've seen, tremendous changes just by doing training of staff and changing what their role is from, police officer type traffic people to being, traffic assistance and, helping. So they said it was a real mind shift. That was just one example that they shared with me.
Okay. Well, so what do people have any comments on these issues? I mean, how much do you want to dig in against improvement, or how much improvement can be tolerated without tripping over any type of issues with the airlines?
Just quickly, I just wanted to jump in and make two comments about the briefing papers that I've been working on. One, I took a stab at the noise pollution, circulated it to a couple of folks for some feedback, and compiled it looking at sort of the county stats from the website. Michael was good enough to point me in that direction. So just kind of drawing my own conclusions from it. Happy to circulate it to a wider audience. It was just a first draft effort, but I think it's a good start. So that's happening. In terms of the second one, which was traffic. I had a Zoom with Francisco and April after our site visit, and the message I received pretty clearly was, the traffic issues are up to the municipalities to solve, not necessarily the problem of the airport to address. Michelle, you triggered that thought when you were talking about traffic at LaGuardia. They don't seem to have an on-site traffic issue, but the access points to the airport are impacting the local municipalities, and they didn't feel that that was necessarily their responsibility to solve. So not quite sure how to proceed with the traffic portion of this briefing paper. We've got some basic stats on King Street and some accident reports, but beyond that, not much else.
Wouldn't a logical conclusion then be that the airport, as one of our recommendations for the master plan, that the airport needs to work closely with the neighboring municipalities on traffic issues? Just leave it at that.
Probably makes the most sense. Yeah.
Peter? Peter?
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit on, or build on what Nick said. So number one, we have the opportunity here to paint a picture of actual traffic related problems and stresses. that, number one, people involved, may very well, it may not be on their radar. It's not within their job description. They've got enough to worry about without looking further on. But that's our problem. So this is our opportunity to take that piece of the picture, piece of the pie that either they're not looking at, or not out of meanness, but just out of that they're not focusing on, and don't really want to focus on unless they're forced to, and force them to look at it. Number two, we create a reference point for debate, discussion, and advocacy going forward. Number three, to the extent that we can define a problem, then at the very least, it then becomes a break and another reason to approach anything that could aggravate, that could create more traffic, with the utmost caution. And as Nick said, the maximum amount of consultation. And the difference, the difference between, here's the connector. April and Fernando are in charge of the airport. But April is not just in charge of the airport. She's a county employee. She's an airport professional, but she's an advisor to the county. And the owner of the airport is the county, and the county is, does have an interest. I mean, it has a direct responsibility for certain aspects of roads in Westchester, not all, for sure. But I think the argument is that, again, from a political point of view, what we don't want is people acting in silos and doing stuff at the airport that maybe it affects a quote unquote county road, but state roads and local roads, both in New York and Connecticut, are impacted. And all of these governments work together in many respects. Certainly the current position of the county government is, the Latimer administration very plainly adopted and this is something you might want to look up. It adopted an executive order at the beginning of Latimer's term that had to do with making sure county actions that would that would be expected to have an impact on local municipalities, that there would be consultation and review. And certainly that should apply. That would be a great citation to put in, to apply to airport actions that could impact municipal and state roads. So that's my quick brain dump on that. And at the end of the day, it's not up to us to come up with the solutions. We are not it's wonderful what Martha's done, but I keep saying this: we're not the issue area professionals. If we can come up with good prescriptive ideas, then great, let's do that. But it is equally valuable to state problems, state our interests, kind of lay out the issue, and then request that the master plan and county policy in general be responsive.
Does the master plan have any other off-site areas that it addresses? That was because we raised this at the very beginning, you'll recall.
Well, if you look at the air pollution, Martha raises that for well
That's a good
outside of
one.
the airport. You look
But
at drainage, it's well outside the airport. So
Yeah.
yeah. And
Good.
Rich, I know you're in Connecticut, but you should look up, the county actually owns some bizarre roads. I mean, you never know what they own. And you should try to figure out, they may well own some of the key roads approaching the airport. And they're responsible for maintaining those. So,
Juliana, do you have any insight on King Street?
You know, King Street is one of those weird things where the border runs back and forth across it. So beyond that, I think it's worth looking into what the county may own in our area. But I'd kind of be surprised if it goes beyond King Street. But that's not to say it's not true.
So we have information on Port Chester and Rye Brook. So we can use that information, but looking up county roads, I think would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I think Nick made a good point that air pollution is well beyond the airport perimeter. And maybe the traffic falls into that type of category.
well, noise is going to be the same way.
Noise the same way, right?
I guess it's a matter of convincing the airport to think of it that way then. They seem more
Well,
receptive.
you know, that's I think one of the issues. You don't necessarily have to convince the airport, you have to convince the county,
Right. Exactly.
right? I think it's not, that's, I think it's.
Yeah, we're very blessed. We are very fortunate to have the airport actually be owned by the county and not by, some airport authority, for example, and certainly not, having been privatized. So we have a political entity that is, fairly locally sensitive and responsive. And so whereas an airport official sees a boundary line, a county politician understands that their votes are coming from obviously all around, not just the airport property.
You know, I want to come back to something that was said earlier in the call about letting it be known where we stand for the upcoming elections, or if there is an election or a primary. I think that's important to do. And I'm wondering how we go about making it known that we exist and we're doing these things and we would like the county to pay attention. Do you have any thoughts about that? Is it something published in a local newspaper? I'm just trying to brainstorm.
Well, Ken Jenkins who's going to be the governor, at least on a temporary basis, has been receiving all the information from the committee, the task force, that George Latimer did. So I think he's aware of it. He's not as aware as George Latimer was, but I think once we start producing these resolutions, I think that'll get his attention. But that's my own view.
Yeah, and historically, I think he supported our initiatives. I'm thinking back when he ran for county executive against Astorino. But I think there's and certainly having him involved is important. I'm wondering if there's a public component to that, and that is, do we somehow publish our findings in the newspapers or on News 12 or something like that?
I don't know. We hadn't discussed that at all. That's an interesting issue you raised, but it wasn't on the radar screen prior to this moment.
Yeah, maybe this is just food for thought,
Right.
but while it's important for the politicians to know where we stand, I think it's also important for the politicians to know that the public knows where we stand. Maybe down the road a bit.
Yeah, let's take, if people could think about it, it's kind of a complicated topic. So if people could think about it, maybe next time or so, we could raise it and talk about it. Okay. Okay. Rich, you're also working on noise. Anything there?
Yeah, I circulated the briefing paper a few weeks ago for feedback.
Yeah, thanks for that. I thought that was a good starting point, Rich, and I look forward to discussing it with you.
Great, thank you. I just looking at the stats. it's, I made some recommendations based on, my findings. As suspected, helicopter traffic is up significantly over the years. What's interesting is, I think post-COVID, there are a lot of new residents that aren't quite sure how to report noise complaints, because I'm seeing that noise complaints are down, but traffic is up, which is unusual, particularly in the summer months. And I think that's also due in part to people traveling and not being around. And, one recommendation, for example, was the county do a better job communicating how to file reports and better outreach efforts, because there are a lot of new residents post-COVID that probably don't know. Things like that. Just looking at some of the numbers and some of the trends that they put on the website that didn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, this actually ties back to what John was saying, in that at some point we want to make through the local newspapers what the issues are, what's been going on, which would tie into, for example, if your conclusion was there's been a lot more helicopter traffic and there's been a lot fewer complaints, for example, then people could be alerted as to how to make a complaint should they want to. Open
But-
ideas, folks.
On the traffic front, though, the airport could offer, there aren't any stats. They're just not looking at it, so we'll
Right.
keep digging.
Okay. Michelle, you want to talk about passenger experience? You're making progress and now you're going to send over a draft, right?
Right. Also, I mentioned the call I had last night. I want to
Right.
just mention another suggestion that they had for us was in terms of parking. And I know Larry did a little write-up about parking, which I'll share with you when I send you my write-up. But they were mentioning how they handled parking at LaGuardia, how you could park short-term in one area and then, long-term in another area in the same lot. And I don't think it's divided that way at Westchester County. You could park anywhere. Is that true on that lot that they currently have? Do you guys know?
Peter?
So, yeah, there's been a decent amount of discussion about parking in the last few months at the County Airport Advisory Board meetings. I can try to look back. I can give you a very quick summary now, but I can, between Mike and I, we should be able to look back and maybe point you to the right meeting. The good news is those meetings are recorded now. And so you can have access to, all of the information verbatim. But just to summarize, over the last year, it's about the last year, the county has, there was a lot of parking congestion. People parked in illegal spots along driveways and on grassy berms and such, because there seemed to be a lack of parking. And at the garage, the main garage, and we're talking about the passenger terminal now, the main passenger terminal. The county responded, the county and Capelli, who's who has the lease on the parking garage until the end of next year. At which point, by the way, there was discussion last night about, what the county's plan for the future of that parking garage is, whether to put it out to bid, extend the lease, take over the garage and run it itself, keeping in mind that it's a big moneymaker, but also keeping in mind that the county cannot spend that money outside the airport. So anyway, the county number one, allowed Capelli to create premier, like premium reserve spots at the garage. I could tell you there's good and bad to that. I've gone to the airport for meetings many times. I've seen lots of empty premium spots, and the lot is otherwise full, which seems like a real waste. But the county also took parking areas, outdoor parking areas, for example, where there used to be like the cell phone parking lot, and they've turned that into a overflow, not long-term per se, long-term, short-term, but overflow parking with shuttle bus, with shuttle bus transportation back to the main terminal, which all together, and they've also, last but not least, added on the website. I've been told that if you go on the website now, there's a scroll or a headline that gives you the status of the parking garage, lets you know if the overflow, if you should plan on using the overflow parking or not. So I don't believe there's like any short-term, long-term differentiations. Where there have been differentiations, in the terminal, anecdotally, I can just say that, I see it as a step backwards, not a step forwards in terms of utilization. I'm sure it makes more money for Capelli, but beyond, so that's that. And there's been talk and there's been data shared on parking utilization in the last few months that the airport prepared for the advisory board. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think what they were sharing with me last night was if you offer very short-term parking, at little or no cost, it helps with the traffic flow. So people can easily just pull in to some spots and pick up their person and just, come out of the, short-term parking quickly. I think that's what they were trying to convey.
Well, the airport has been permitting cars to line up just back from the terminal, since the cell phone lot is not always available. It used to be the cell phone lot was the place for that. Then my understanding is they kind of turned the cell phone lot into backup parking with the shuttle. So when that's heavily utilized, I imagine you may not be able to just sit there. But what they've done then is, I see cars lined up along the curb back from the terminal, almost all the way to the entrance, the roundabout, and the county police are not, don't seem to be having a problem with that. So that's providing, at busy times, that's providing that sort of short-term standing option anyway.
I apologize for stepping away. I had a phone call come in, so I may have missed part of this discussion. So I think there's a couple of animals here. One is the pickup issue, separate from parking, and parking has been a pet peeve of mine because there's ongoing complaints about not having enough parking, and they have these expansion lots, and they've closed down or they're utilizing what was the cell phone lot. I'm old enough to remember when they replaced the Quonset hut with the terminal, and the county was in an uproar, and the argument was, don't worry about it over expansion. We're building a parking garage that can only park these many cars. So you can't come back to me now and say, hey, there's not enough parking. Like, my answer is, okay, so it functions as designed. You can't come back now after the fact and say we want something bigger.
Do you know how many spots the current parking lot has?
Sorry, I don't.
That should be,
we-
that may be
Can
on
we
the,
find that out?
that may be on the documentation that was distributed to the AAB. It would certainly be, certainly a quick call to the county airport office should be able to give you that information. I agree with John. Keep in mind that on top of that, there's now the whatever they call it, the fly and ride from Purchase College. So that's significant additional parking. There's a planned lot in North Castle that's been, I think, permitted and approved, but with no on the airport drive there. But that's not going to come online terribly soon. So we're already looking at expansion without the county getting even further involved. It does beg the question, and here's what I'll say about parking. We've been told for months now that the airline passenger counts are at the highest they've been, and they're significant percentages up from last year. And according to the county, right, Mike, we've been told that as long as they've been keeping track of numbers, not the number of flights, but the number of passengers. Now, the number of passengers per half hour is capped. So what the county has been saying is, yeah, we're at 85 to 90, or I've heard sometimes above 90% of the capped passengers per half hour. And they clarified that when they say that, they mean from 5:30 in the morning when traffic starts between 5:30 and 6 until midnight when the overnight voluntary curfew goes into effect. Now, the county also claims that it's done audits of this, but the county has not initially promised to share with the Airport Advisory Board the methodology and more detailed results of those audits. And then also citing the same lawsuits that have been cited as a reason to delay the master plan revision process. The county cited those lawsuits to say that they weren't comfortable going ahead and sharing that data. Now, each month, April asserts that the terminal use agreement limitations of passengers, 270 passengers combined arriving and departing per half hour, is not being violated. But I can tell you that even years ago, I had colleagues who dug into the data and came away scratching their heads as to how that could possibly be. And now the passenger counts are significantly higher. Now, keep in mind that, parking is not an exact, reflection of daily passenger counts because, a lot depends on how long vehicles are left. But the two are not unrelated either. And more transparency regarding the terminal use regulation compliance and audit process, might help us understand what's going on better.
Yeah, can I speak to that for a minute, Peter?
Sure.
Yeah, the parking issue, the parking problems when we talk about on the Airport Advisory Board are attributed to people taking longer trips. So it's not that it's more traffic. This is what they're telling us. It's that the cars are staying there longer. And I think if you asked me, and just intuitively, it strikes me parking is a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator, right? Parking is a function of air travel, right? People don't decide to travel by air because whether there's parking or not. So to me, it's a symptom. It's not a cause. And to verify the duration argument, we've asked for that data and whether people are in fact taking longer trips and therefore leaving their cars for longer periods of time. And the only source for that information is the airlines themselves, and that's proprietary data. that the airlines are not willing to share. So while parking is a inconvenience, and there's also been discussion of constructing another parking garage on the, I guess, eastern portion of the property. Did I say that correctly, Peter? Next to those buildings that you see on the right when you enter the airport before you get to the terminal, on airport property. And then when you combine that with the project that Peter referred to, that's to be constructed on New King Street in North Castle, you are looking at a substantial expansion of parking in and around the airport. And my information is that progress on the private facility on New King Street is going to accelerate now that the new water line extending from the airport into North Castle is being completed. So I think the parking issues are likely to be alleviated, but I don't see that as solving any of the other collateral, effects that we've been concerning ourselves with.
Yeah, parking and traffic are related to some extent. I mean, I agree with everything that Mike said. I think, the airport has taken a step in the right direction in terms of putting a basic, a scrolling update on parking availability on their website. But let's face it, in today's day and age, it's not difficult at all to imagine a much more robust, kind of system where if you're taking a flight at the airport, with a little AI, you could be told well in advance, or even without AI, you could be told well in advance what the situation is. And I'm sure there'd be plenty of companies who would love to be on that app, so that with a touch of the button, you could arrange for transportation to and from the airport and not have to worry about parking at all. So there's lots of ways to deal with parking. And I think, personally, I think it's far scarier to imagine overbuilding parking and then having that be a pressure towards future expansion of other capabilities at the airport, as opposed to, again, giving time for this North Castle facility to play out, using better communication about parking to potential passengers. There's a lot of strategies that can be used, to address the issue without laying the groundwork for expansionary pressures.
Sounds good. Thank you.
By the way, a quick Google search says there are 1,533 spaces in the garage. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's just what I got real quickly.
Then just another thing I want to chime in about the garage too. It's actually with the village library, we get paid actually from Capelli himself because it's actually on village property. So there was a 30-year lease that just expired this year, but we're in the process of renewing it for until about 2026. So again, the county also has to sign off on it too, because then again, just like Capelli's the one that has the lease for it. And for those that don't know, again, Capelli is one of the premier developers within the county, particularly Westchester, New Rochelle, but he has the lease from it, as Peter said. But it was originally a 30-year lease that began in '94, and now at least the county hopefully will give it to him until 2026. That's the plan. But again, it is on village property, so the village does get revenue for it.
But there's a new
Wait.
garage that's been approved by North Castle, right, Peter? Or
What's
Yeah.
that?
Yes,
Mike.
yeah, Nick, the new parking garage on New King Street has been approved by North Castle. That's correct. And I think they needed some county approvals after that, which they've obtained.
Yes, the developer told me they've obtained it and they're just working on their financing.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, there's been no rush to build because there's no water for the fire suppression system. And they're not going to use well water because it's been declared contaminated by PFAS. So they've kind of had to wait on the county.
Hmm.
But Greg, this is news to me. The land that the garage sits on is not county land.
It's on Rybrook property, so that's why we get some revenue from it every year.
And but the Capelli doesn't own the land or lease the land, right? It just
No.
leases the operation of the garage from the county. So is your agreement is with the county or with Capelli?
No, with the county as well as, but Capelli also as well. So we have to have they both have to sign off on it. So the county basically allows the Capelli organization to have the lease for it. And again, this
Right.
goes back to about 1994, because it was originally a 30-year lease that they gave him. But it's within Rybrook's jurisdiction. So that's why we get the Capelli organization pays us revenue for it.
It's one of those
It's
odd,
like
one of those
it's a
odd
pilot?
things where the,
So yeah, it's a fix. So every year, I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but every year it's a fixed rate. Although this time around, with the extension until 2026, we asked and the Capelli organization agreed just to increase it a little bit annually per year up until 2026. But again, also it depends on county approval, so I don't know. I mean, we've agreed to it in our end between us and Capelli. I just don't know whether Capelli and the county are on their end.
So Greg, are you saying that revenue is divided between the county and the village, or it goes entirely to the village?
I don't know if what the county share is, what they get, but again, it's a specific allocated to the village of Rybrook. And
Like-
that goes back to honestly even before I was even alive. That was an agreement made even actually with Chris's predecessor in the existing board at the time. I think actually probably under Mayor Sal Krasinski, who was actually on the county board. So you could probably ask him about it too. So he probably was the mayor at the time.
like it is divided between the two, not on an equal basis. And the lease itself is kind of oddly written.
Yeah.
I forget if it's
Mhm.
front loaded or back loaded, but at one point the county makes out better either in the beginning or at the end. So you're gonna see this come up, Greg, when the
Yeah, I said I don't know. I do know they get revenue. I just don't know what their exact amount is. I just
Do
have.
you
Okay.
know when the lease when the land lease renews?
So I actually I had the email up right now since we were talking about this. Just give me 1 sec.
Because the
So,
Capelli
beginning-
lease,
beginning August 1st, so which was been a few months ago. So that's when it should have went through for us in terms of what the new dollar amounts were, in terms of what we get from them per month and then annually.
okay. So do you feel like you have any information that would be revealing regarding the future of Capelli's involvement with the parking garage beyond year end 2025 when their lease extension terminates?
The 2026 is when I don't know exactly myself. Maybe Chris does, but I don't know if we have any of that information within Rybrook and what they're going to do outside of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
But that's just the
Uh,
latest. I just wanted to
let's-
fill you in where we are now because that just happened a few months ago when we went through this process.
Okay. But let's move on. And I think if Greg Elders is on, he and I are working on the fixed base operations. And we've had conversations with several people, including Peter and Michael, about the fixed base operations. And we're going to have to get together. We haven't done this yet, and kind of put together a draft of what we think the important issues are. And that probably is when we want to go see April, because it's a little tricky issue, you know. Greg, do you agree?
Yeah, because I think there's different players and I think we've had challenges, different views, and what can really be done with the FBOs.
Okay, so we are not as advanced as any other group, so but
But we'll catch
we're
up.
gonna try to make it up. We'll have a strong finish, Greg.
May I, John? I can't remember if this got mentioned when we were together, but I see a very consistent pattern, and I'm hearing more about it today, where the airport officials are not going to be particularly receptive to anything that smacks of, you know, Monday morning or whatever it is, Monday morning quarterbacking,
Mhm.
of how they run the airport, passenger seat driving, what have you. So, to the extent that people are speaking to them, my advice is to make very clear that the goal here is not to tell them how to manage their airport and run their airport. The goal is to address legitimate community interests and impacts, and that we can't help but see a dotted line between those impacts and what goes on at the airport. And so, we're not trying to, substitute our layperson's knowledge, but in some ways we're trying to explore what logically seems like, it could be done, or what could help logically, and reality testing it against their expertise. But I will tell you that there is I have observed over the years a natural tendency on their part, to kind of self-justify by saying, hey, if there were an easy way for it to be better, well, we would have already made it better. So that's difficult, and that's impossible, and that's challenging, and just expect that. And just because the airport officials don't immediately embrace something, I don't think that means we need to back off. Certainly not from our core interests and goals. And again, at the end of the day, it's not up to us to figure out the best path. It's kind of up to them. So
I think what Greg and I are interested in is what what does the county see as the important issues relative to the FBOs? And basically, I mean, that's, then he and I can think about that, and then we'll come back. But that's kind of what we're doing here. I mean, that's why we've had these conversations with people such as yourself, because we're just trying to figure out what the issues are. Is that fair, Greg?
Yeah,
Okay. So anyway, let's go on then. The third one here, we've talked about a number of these things. We want the first one, I think we've talked about, we want what we want the county to do with the master plan results, or because we want what the county to understand what issues are important to the municipalities. And I think the other point we have here, which I think everyone is on board with, my view is unanimity is really important. That's really an important goal. And so we want to make sure that these resolutions are not so vague that nobody knows what we're talking about, but not so explicit that people can kind of hunt and peck through what we're saying. So just keep that in mind. I don't think this is a real risk, but I think that we've just got to keep in mind we want to produce resolutions that both have meat and are acceptable to all the municipalities, because the strength of the task force is unanimity, right? Any comments on that? Everybody agrees. Okay. Then I do think we have to continue. I started talking with Juliana about this before everybody joined. Once all the resolutions are passed, we have to think about what's the role of the task force. And so we're going to have an individual municipality saying, I'd like to explore further the issue of noise. And the two people on noise are Michael and Rich. But suppose the request comes from Portchester. You know, how do we put that together? You know, are the people from Portchester going to want to work with Michael and Rich? And do Michael and Rich want to do that kind of work? I mean, I'm not saying we have an answer here tonight, but I'm saying we have to think through what we're going to do as things evolve. And
I'm
I
not
don't
sure I
know
follow you, John.
what the various resolutions of the individual municipalities, to the extent they passed a resolution in appointing people, what they said about the scope of the appointment. I just don't know. I'd asked that question a couple of months ago and nobody responded. Now, maybe it was all pretty informal, so we kind of work our way through this. Rybrook was not informal. Rybrook actually had, the Board of Trustees passed a resolution nominating two people for the task force. I do not know what the process was in the other municipalities.
John, I'm sorry, I'm not following you. Are you are you projecting into the future
Yes, I'm wondering
after,
what people want to do
well, so
after we've produced all the resolutions.
we produced the resolutions, we've submitted them, they've been approved. Is that what you're saying? And now they're in the county
What
stand.
happens after that?
So if I may, you're 100% right to try to keep us some piece of our brain thinking about that. But there's so many variables that could come up between now and then. We could be, hot and heady into the master plan process. And so, without any adjustment to anyone's mandate, it would make sense for us to continue meeting. The county could ask to meet with us, or we could, or could take us up on our offer to meet with them to go over, recommendations in greater detail with them, or the airport staff, or the consultant. On the other hand, this whole thing could die on the vine, and then the question is, do we want to use the collaboration and the network that we've created in some sort of ongoing, exploratory watchdog or way? It's so difficult to know that now.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think we have to think about what type of time commitment people want to make and what they think they ought to be doing in the future. The future is a little undefined. I completely agree with you. So I'm not saying we need to come to an answer now, but I think people have to think about that because in fact, no one will have worked on all these topics. So it would involve all the people on the task force, some of whom have been relatively inactive, to have to get involved and do that. I don't know if people have signed on for that. That's what I want them to think about. That's all. I'm not prejudging the problem. But I think we don't want to be caught by surprise.
Yeah,
Because
let's
I'm
cross
hopeful.
that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, but I think we should think about, that. But I think that we'll be crossing that bridge. I think we can have all the resolutions done by February, late February or something like that. We're on a reasonable track to do that. Okay. Any other business people want to bring up?
John, I just have a question for Michelle since you're on the call. Michelle, did you want to still speak with April? Because I know you emailed me, but I tried to email you a few times, but I don't know if you received it or not. But I'm gonna have a phone call tomorrow. So.
So I would like to speak to her. If I could do it the first week in December, that would probably be best at
It'll have
this
to be, yeah, 'cause
point.
she'll need time to able to get her schedule together. But again, did you check your emails by any chance?
I didn't see a message back from you, but I will recheck it.
Okay. Well, okay. I mean,
And,
again, unless it didn't go through, because I sent it to you a few times regarding that.
oh, really? Okay, I didn't receive it, but I would like an opportunity to speak with her. And that would be great.
Maybe you two should exchange telephone numbers, just in case he can't get the email through to you, Michelle.
Right. What's your
Question for you, though,
number and
does,
I'll call
does
you?
everybody have like a work cell? I mean, you probably are supposed to call me now because again, I'm not gonna be in the office until December. Anyway, because I right now have a screw and a staple in my foot. And
Oh,
I can't,
wow.
but I'll just retype in the chat again here, just so everyone has my work cell.
Okay, so
If we're getting ready to break, I can just share a couple of informative headlines from the meeting last night. No one objects. So, number one, there were 190,228 passengers, airline passengers, that went through the terminal last month, up 2%. Number two,
last month,
yeah. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, yes.
a heck of a lot of people per day, isn't it?
Well, all right, maybe. Yeah, you're right. That must be year to date. I apologize. Still up 2%. And actually,
We've already become LaGuardia North.
yeah, right. More meaningful actually to have a year to date in through 10 months to versus just a 1 month up or down. Breeze has added Sarasota and Daytona as destinations you can get to through our airport now. Next, I would say is that I learned that this summer, the federal government, several years late, but nonetheless, passed in the latest FAA Authorization Act, they finally authorized non-PFAS firefighting foam. PFAS is, probably at this point, most of us are aware of these, quote unquote, forever chemicals that are linked to all sorts of health problems, are very difficult to get rid of, and have been present they have not been measured in the reservoir, but they are no doubt in the reservoir because of groundwater contamination at the airport, for which the airport is now officially a brownfield under New York state law. And the county is working diligently to mitigate the risk, but it is certainly and the county has moved promptly to start the process of retrofitting its tanker trucks and firefighting equipment to utilize the new chemicals, which no one has yet determined will be equally harmful. So for now, we can consider it an improvement. So that's happening, and that's good news. And we all need some good news. Lastly, as I said, the millionaire lawsuit and an ongoing argument over their alleged right to build yet another big hangar for corporate jets was resolved. That initiative is dead, but there's nothing to stop it from being revived in the future. But for now, it has been laid to rest. And as part of that, a new environmental assessment on the work that was already done on the first hangar and their new fancy terminal and some parking, that has been resubmitted for public comment. Normally, as many people here know, the environmental assessment is submitted to public comment before things are done. But but Millionaire failed to do that, and then did it improperly. So they're now, the county and Millionaire are going through this process to clean up the mess. Public comment on that, which can be as simple as, well, I mean, it can be very, erudite and scientific, or it could just be, we love Millionaire, we hate Millionaire, or whatever you want to put in the public comment. But public comment on that is open until December 12th. Okay, so I just want people to be aware of that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the next meeting, and honestly, the way things have been going, I think people need a little time to complete their papers. So maybe we try to see what's available the week of January 13th, or is that too far away? I think we'll be okay there.
I think so.
You send around a doodle poll, and no one has an objection to that week? Hopefully we can target Thursdays. Most Thursdays seem to work for us. So if you could send around a doodle poll for that week.
Did you say that week again? I'll try my best. I don't have
January 13th.
I'll see if I can get access to the account on my home computer because I do it from the
When
office.
you get back in the office, right? It's quite a ways away, so.
Well, I'll just make note of it. It's January 13th.
Okay.
So we're gonna bypass December then.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how I think it's better let people spend their time working on these things, no? Anybody want to meet in December? I know they're great fun, these meetings, even though we don't serve refreshments, but. Okay, so January it is.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Greg. Thanks all.
All right, thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Yep, and Michelle, make
Thanks,
sure you either call
everybody.
me either after this meeting or tomorrow morning because I have a phone call with April at 2 and definitely like to touch base with you before then.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
And
Thank you.
my work cells in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, Greg, good.
Yeah. I think that
When do you expect to be back?